The concert hall was packed, buzzing with anticipation. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting golden light on the polished grand piano at center stage. The audience had gathered to witness a world-renowned pianist perform, a man celebrated for his brilliance and, occasionally, his arrogance. Among the crowd sat a modest woman in a simple dress, her hands folded quietly in her lap. She wasn't there for fame or spectacle, just to enjoy the music. As the pianist finished his third piece, he scanned the crowd with a mischievous grin. Then, in a moment that felt more like mockery than generosity, he pointed to the woman and said, "Why don't you come up and play something for us?" Laughter rippled through the hall. The woman hesitated, her cheeks flushed with surprise. But then, slowly, she stood. As she walked toward the piano, the room fell into an uneasy silence. Every step echoed under the weight of expectation and amusement. Whispers floated through the crowd. "She's not a musician, is she? Why would he ask her?" Even the pianist leaned back in his seat with a smug smile, arms folded, clearly expecting a clumsy performance, a bit of comedic relief before his next masterpiece. The woman reached the piano and paused. Her fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. Then she closed her eyes with the gentlest touch. Her hands landed, not like an amateur, but like someone remembering something buried deep inside. The first notes emerged, hesitant but hauntingly beautiful. The audience leaned forward. The melody grew soft, melancholic, then swelling with quiet power. The woman's fingers moved with fluid grace, as if the piano were an extension of her soul. No sheet music, no hesitation, only emotion, flowing through every note. The audience sat spellbound. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the pianist's smug smirk began to fade, replaced by a furrowed brow. He leaned forward, studying her hands, that touch, the phrasing, the control. It was not beginner's luck. This was raw, seasoned talent, hidden behind simplicity. Somewhere in the back row, a man whispered, "Who is she?" The woman kept playing, eyes closed, lost in the music, or perhaps in something long forgotten. The melody spilled out like water from a hidden spring, fragile, yet unmistakably moving. Her fingers flowed across the keys with grace, painting stories with each note. This wasn't just playing, it was remembering. The audience sat frozen, expressions shifting from confusion to disbelief. A tear traced down an old man's cheek. A couple clasped their hands together. Even the pianist, the one who invited her, up half in jest, leaned forward, his playful grin replaced by something harder to define. Maybe regret. Her music spoke of loss, love, and longing. No words, no explanations. Just emotion, laid bare on every key. Then, as softly as she began, she finished. The room erupted. The woman's playing stirred something unspoken. Each note seemed to reach beyond the hall, touching hearts, unraveling memories. Some felt joy, others, tears they hadn't expected. Her music wasn't just beautiful, it felt lived in, worn like an old photograph. The pianist, once amused, now sat completely still. His fingers tapped his knee nervously, eyes locked on her face. Recognition flickered. Had he heard that piece before? Or was it the way she played it, like someone who'd experienced loss, love, and longing all at once? She wasn't performing, she was confessing. And somewhere in the crowd, someone began to quietly weep. As applause thundered through the hall, the woman simply stood by the piano, head bowed. She didn't smile, she didn't bow, she just breathed quietly, like she had released something long held inside. The crowd wasn't clapping out of politeness anymore. They were stunned, moved, shaken. "You can't teach that," someone murmured. "She played like she lived through every note," whispered another. The pianist remained seated, now with eyes fixed on her, no longer amused, no longer in control. The stage, once solely his domain, had been reclaimed by raw emotion. He rose slowly, approaching her with a mix of hesitation and humility. You've played before, he said softly. She looked up. Her voice, barely audible, carried a gravity no lesson could ever replicate. Once, a long time ago. The pianist stood beside her, struggling to read the story in her eyes. Something about the way she played, so raw, so real, unsettled him. It wasn't technique. It was soul. Where did you learn that? He asked, voice gentler now, almost reverent. She gave a small smile, one that carried 1,000 memories. It's not something you learn, she said. It's something you lose, and sometimes find again. The audience lingered, unwilling to leave, caught in the gravity of what had just happened. Stage managers hovered anxiously. The schedule was broken. No encore could top this moment. And somewhere deep inside the pianist, a wall began to crumble. The kind built from pride, perfection, and fear. The pianist looked at her. No longer with arrogance, but curiosity, and something bordering on reverence. I didn't know, he said, quietly, almost to himself. She gave a faint smile. Neither did I, not anymore. The silence between them was electric. The audience watched, suspended in a moment that felt too sacred to break. He gestured toward the piano. Would you play another? The woman hesitated. For a moment, pain flickered across her face, the kind you only carry if music once broke you. I haven't touched a piano in years, she replied. But you just did, he said. And you reminded all of us why music matters. She glanced at the piano. Again, her hand twitched, not with fear, but longing. Backstage, people murmured, trying to piece together who this woman was. No one could find her name in the program. No one remembered seeing her before tonight. Was she a student? Asked one. She's too refined for that, replied another. The pianist, still standing beside her, seemed caught between discomfort and fascination. He couldn't tear his gaze away. May I ask your name? He said quietly. She paused, as if the question stirred memories not easily retrieved. Alina, she said finally. Alina read. The name hung in the air like a ghost. A gasp escaped. Someone in the front row. Alina Ray, the prodigy who vanished. The pianist froze. That name echoed through conservatories decades ago. Revered, admired, lost, and now, here she was. Not on a stage of her own choosing, but one handed to her, in jest, Alina Ray. The name sent ripples through the crowd, unlocking long dormant recollections. Decades ago, she was hailed as one of the most promising young pianists of her time, a rising star destined to redefine classical music. Then, she vanished. No scandal. No farewell. Just silence. The pianist stepped back, visibly stunned. You were the one who played that haunting Schubert interpretation at the Berlin recital, he whispered. She nodded gently. A lifetime ago. But why did you stop? Alina looked out over the crowd, eyes shimmering with a distant sadness. Life asked different things of me. The piano stopped being mine. Tonight, it called me back. In that instant, the mood shifted, no longer about performance or pride, but about rediscovery. The pianist, still reeling from the revelation, felt a tremble beneath his confident facade. For years, he'd been celebrated, applauded perhaps, even worshipped as the pinnacle of artistry. But now, standing beside Alina, he felt like a student. You were my idol, he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. I studied your recordings, tried to copy your phrasing, your pauses, but tonight, I saw something I never learned. Alina looked at him with kind eyes, not judgmental, not proud, just present. The music isn't in the notes, she said. It's in what you give to them. He nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson. For the first time in his career, he wasn't chasing perfection, he was chasing meaning. Backstage, whispers turned to wonder. Staff members scrambled to document the moment, unsure whether they'd witnessed history or a miracle. The name Alina Ray began circulating across social media, a ghost resurrected by a single performance. In the lobby, a young girl clutched her mother's hand. "Will she play again?" she asked, eyes wide. The mother knelt, tears in her eyes. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we'll never forget tonight." Alina, still standing by the piano, turned toward the audience one last time. Her eyes scanned the sea of faces, no longer strangers, but witnesses. The pianist stood beside her, no longer a man who played to impress, but one who now played to connect. "You've changed everything," he said. She smiled. "Sometimes, music finds you when you stop trying to chase it." The hall slowly emptied, but the air still hummed with reverence. Alina gathered her coat, ready to slip back into obscurity, but the pianist wasn't ready to let her vanish again. He approached with gentle urgency. "Would you consider playing with me? Not as a guest, as a partner?" She paused, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. "People need to hear you," he continued, "not just once, but again and again." Elena's gaze fell to the piano, then to the man who once mocked, now humbled. "Playing isn't what I feared," she said quietly. "It's being seen." "You were seen tonight," he replied, "and no one will ever forget it." For the first time in years, she nodded, not with resignation, but with quiet hope. Alina stepped outside into the cool night air, the echo of applause still lingering in her ears. She hadn't planned this. She hadn't wanted it. But something inside her had shifted. She looked up at the stars, distant, silent witnesses to a life once lived in music and now stirred awake. Inside, the pianist watched her from the doorway, unsure whether to follow or simply let her be. He sensed that this wasn't just a comeback. It was a reckoning. Alina closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "I thought I buried this part of me." But the piano had unearthed it, not with force, but with grace. And now, the question lingered, what would she do with it? The next morning, Alina received a letter, hand-delivered, no fanfare. It was from the pianist. Inside, a simple note: "There's a concert next month. I want you to open it, not as a guest, as the soul of the evening." She stared at the words, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Her fingers traced the edges of the paper, remembering the feel of ivory keys beneath them. For years, she had buried her talent beneath routine, silence, and fear. But now, someone had seen her, not just the music, but the woman behind it. She folded the letter and placed it beside her piano. It had been untouched for years, dusty, silent until now. She sat down, lifted the lid, and pressed a single note. It rang clear. Alina sat at the piano, the morning light spilling across the keys like a quiet blessing. Her fingers hovered, uncertain, but drawn by something deeper than memory, a calling. She pressed another note, then another. A melody began to form, soft and unfinished, like a conversation just beginning. It wasn't the grand performance from the night before. It was something more intimate, a dialogue between past and present. Outside, the pianist waited, unsure if she would answer his invitation. Inside, Alina played, not for the crowd, not for the stage, but for herself. And in that moment, she knew, the silence she had lived in was no longer her home. The concert hall was different this time, not grand, not gilded. Just a modest venue, with warm lighting and an intimate crowd. No posters, no fanfare. Just a name whispered among those who remembered, Alina Rez. She stepped onto the stage, not with the poise of a performer, but with the quiet strength of someone reclaiming a part of herself. The pianist stood beside her, no longer the star, but the support. As she sat at the piano, the audience leaned in, not for spectacle, but for truth. She began to play, and with each note, the silence of years unraveled. The music wasn't flawless. It didn't need to be. It was honest, and that honesty moved everyone. As the final note faded, The room held its breath. Alina sat still, her hands resting gently on the keys, eyes closed. She wasn't performing anymore. She was remembering, healing, becoming. The audience rose, not in applause, but in reverence. The pianist stepped forward, not to take a bow, but to stand beside her, a quiet acknowledgement that greatness doesn't always come with spotlight. But sometimes, Alina opened her eyes and looked out, not at strangers, but at a world that had waited for her return. She didn't need to speak. The music had said everything, and as she stood and walked off stage, the piano remained, no longer a relic of her past, but a companion for her future, because the music never left her. She had simply found her way back.